Well, hello, America. This is Commander Al Palmer, United States Navy retired. I'm your host here at Stars and Stripes, and we're here to tell you a bit about the problems and the solutions we see for reserving and preserving our military in the United States. And I'm happy here to be with you today to welcome our chairman of the board, Lieutenant General Rod Bishop. General Bishop is an illustrious command pilot from the United States Air Force, and he's had an amazing amount of experience in command across Europe and the South Africa portions of the world. So, Rod, welcome, sir. It's good to have you with us today.
Al, I'm delighted to be here with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, so tell us a bit, because I know a little bit about you, and I share one thing with you. I'll let you know right away. I'm also a graduate of USC's Systems Management program with a master's degree, like you do. So we share that among Air Force too. Anyway, but please tell us about your background and what brought you into the service, and how did you feel when you left it?
Well, what brought me into the service, I guess, was a little bit of encouragement from my dad. He had taken me down to Annapolis when I was in high school. I liked it. But I said, yeah, it's pretty old. I knew nothing about the Air Force Academy until my high school class in geometry section on triangles had a picture of the Air Force Academy chapel. And I said, now that looks futuristic and a neat place. And so that's what brought me in. And I guess, how did I feel when I left it? I felt so proud. And that's one of the reasons I think we started Up Stars, is because I was hearing a lot from fellow graduates. And I was hearing a lot from my wife, and I retired outside the gate of the Air Force Academy so we could sponsor cadets. And I was hearing a lot from those cadets that, quote, the culture is changing underneath my feet, and my fellow grads who lived in the area and had retired before I did, saying, I don't feel that same sense of pride anymore. So that's a little bit about me. Back to you.
So when you were there, though, there's a special feeling that I've been there quite a few times. There's a very special feeling about the process of becoming a cadet, especially as a dually, because you're coming in from the outside world. So how did that feel to you, making that transition? Was that difficult for you, or was that not so difficult?
I don't think it was so difficult, Al. I knew it was going to be tough. I prepared myself physically. The mental portion, okay, I never really had any thoughts of quitting. I just loved the place. Not a day I regret having served there. But I did regret, again, when I retired, and my wife and I, for example, host tailgate parties over parents' weekends for parents and cadets. And I would hear from cadets things like, well, I feel like I'm being indoctrinated. Or if
Huh.
they told me we need leaders of diversity one more time, I was going to throw up. I mean, when you hear that from people who are
Yeah.
experiencing, I go, whoa, what the heck is happening? And I should have maybe have taken action sooner than that, sooner than we did in Standing Up Stars. As I'm sure you know, we're only a little over 4 years old now, and have been
Yep.
incorporated just over 3. And a number of these events were happening in the 20 teens when, because we retired to the Colorado Springs area in 2009. You put me on the spot to talk about myself, because it's really one of the, I guess, the biggest things I've ever learned about my military career is that all of us are better than one of us, and it's all about the team that we build or are a part of. So let me start with, I guess, my days as a second lieutenant and finishing pilot training. I was fighter qualified coming out of pilot training, but Vietnam was winding down. I thought we were entering an era of peace, and I just didn't want to spend my career training for the next war. I wanted to, as I looked across the different missions that the Air Force did, I decided that personally I'd like to see the world, but also I saw how at the time, dating myself now, Military Airlift Command was so involved in humanitarian activities around the world. So I chose and had to actually fight for the most used transport at the time was 141. And glad I did. It was a great career. The old Star Lifter took me to 110 countries throughout the world, which I would say gave me a great appreciation for the blessings that we have in the United States of America. Then let me fast forward through, a couple of staff tours and stuff because I think any person who has been blessed with command will tell you that the greatest experience that you can have in the military is being in command. And I had that blessing bestowed on me 7 different times in the Air Force and 2 in the joint world. And the very first command that I had was a challenging one because it was forming an entirely new squadron out of 550 people that lived in 19 different spots on an Air Force base. It's called an Operations Support Squadron. And we brought everybody, together as one team. And you learn values and you brainstorm. How can we make people in life support that put life preservers on airplanes have an affinity and feel unified and cohesiveness as part of a unit, say, with people who are forecasting the weather, or people who are in the RAPCON, the radar control, or people up in the tower. So that was a nice challenge, a fun challenge, and we found lots of neat ways to do that, from our own intramural teams playing, weathers playing life support, etc. Plus, one thing I did that I felt was fairly effective is I called them brown bag lunches. Every day I went to a different part of one of those 19 different buildings and just sat down with those people and you listen. And that's where I learned that trust and confidence go both up and down the chain of command. There are times in my second command, I think that you learn that, maybe you're going to have to have a forceful hand. And one of the things in my second squadron that I did, which had everyone in the entire squadron shaking their head, was we had an air crew stand of valve visit coming our way. And to me, it seemed like a given because they gave you the 300 questions on a test for each different crew position. And, that was a major part of the score of that air crew standardization evaluation. So against everybody's advice, I mandated that nobody was allowed to go home, even if they could go home at the end of the day, but they had to test on those 300 questions to 100%. And people were asking me, why in the world are you doing that to us? We're only going to get 40 questions. And I said, well, you'll see. Well, when that squadron scored 99.6% on the ASEV evaluation and won the Outstanding Strategic Airlift Squadron in the Air Force Award, they kind of understood, I think. Being a commander, I always used to tell people, learn from other commanders around you. And I had the benefit as a 1-star of working for both General Pace and then General Hill at U.S. Southern Command, first as their chief planner and then deputy. And what I learned from them was, do what you can do, focus on what you can focus on, don't overload your plate, but again, make sure that you're building a team. So, for example, Southern Command has 32 countries. It's a combat command of the United States that looks at South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. And I remember General Pace telling me, Rod, we can't be everything to everybody, because the role of the outward-looking combat commands, anyway, is to essentially help the other militaries and theater security cooperation, help them build their capacity. And so we found ways to design uh, how, manners in which we could, criteria in which we could determine where the next dollar was spent. That was General Pace's criteria for me. And one of the things that we took big advantage of, because an important part of the SOUTHCOM mission was trying to keep drugs out of the United States, was an organization that was called JATF, Joint Interagency Task Force South. And at that organization, we had members, I want to say, from 15 different federal agencies in almost all the countries in the South America and the Caribbean countries where drugs were flowing through. So, just building that team with people of different countries and different organizations. Out of that grew some pretty good, I think, recommendations that we gave to the Department of Defense the day after 9/11. And we had seen at Southern Command how bringing people together and leveraging each other's capability was hugely successful. But working with the interagency inside of DC, we also saw how dysfunctional it was. And so two of our recommendations were implemented within a year, and I think they're pretty major recommendations that we put forth. One was to stand up a combatant command. I mentioned most combatant commands look outwards. We had no one focusing inwards at homeland security, or inwards to the security of our homeland, I guess I should say, because standing up a command that did that, i.e. U.S. Northern Command, was accomplished in less than a year. And to bring all the I think there were over 100 different intelligence agencies that had a piece of part here and there in that drug war. And we recommended bringing everyone together into a department, call it Homeland Security. And sure enough, that was stood up in less than a year. We had a third recommendation that still we're fighting to this day. It hasn't been implemented yet, and that was secure the southern border. Because we rationalized back in 2001, if you have 30,000 Americans a year being killed to drugs, terrorists could use the same routes, the same cartels to come through that porous border. So unfortunately, we haven't secured that one, but some great lessons learned in positions not being a commander. The other command I guess I'd like to speak about would be being a Joint Forces commander. Although I retired as the Air Commander Europe and 3rd Air Force Commander, which gave me the responsibility of 30,000 American airmen and their families, and our missions to support both SACEUR, ComUSAFE, the commander of UCOM, with air and space responsibility. This was before the combatant command called AFRICOM was set up. We had air and space responsibility for 93 countries. That was, just a tremendous job. Again, working with partner nations and their security cooperations. And here's where I took a lesson I mentioned from General Pace. We can't be everything to everybody. Well, 93 countries. I mean, what progress are you going to make? And so we did a couple of things in that command. Before I get to speaking about the Joint Forces Command, we did a couple of things in that arena to help us focus. If you're going to go visit 93 countries, what real impact are you going to make? So we went through a really detailed, structured process of what countries can we bring the most benefit to, and what countries could most help the United States of America in a future conflict. And I think, the work that we did with some of our now very strong allies was successful and showed the benefit of making, of culling down, so to speak, those 93 countries into a manageable number that we could make progress with. Another thing that we did, again, taking a page out of lessons that we had learned from other commands, I think, was what are the top 10 worries? I mean, the day I took command, I asked my numbered Air Force, which I think most people realize are primarily fighter heavy. I mean, we had 3 fighter wings over in Europe. I asked them the question, why do we have these 3 fighter wings here? And what are the top 10 things that should keep us awake at night? And so to show you the value of the thought process, I mean, and the intelligence of people that we had, I mean, we would research each one for a week. And the number one thing that should keep us awake at night they came back with was Russia invading Ukraine. Well, Russia's done that twice now. And then we'd drill down on that rabbit hole. And the second one was Russia invading Georgia, which happened 3 months after I left command. And so some real good thought process. And I have to believe that at least the United States Air Forces in Europe were better postured for whatever could come our way, having gone through those exercises and thinking through those things. Plus, we had the opportunity to recommend to SACEUR, different courses of actions on which we should take in each one of those contingencies. And then finally, that opportunity over there in Europe gave me the wonderful experience of having to command military members from other services twice. One was in an exercise, but it was a major exercise. I was aboard the USS Kearsarge, a marine-like type of aircraft carrier in the Med when we started that exercise. And we had sold, after we had gone through that, what are the top 10 things that would keep us awake at night, and what should America do in each of those cases, we came to the conclusion that, short of all-out war, we really probably wouldn't use those 3 fighter squadrons as an example in any type of armed contingency beyond deterrence. And so as we went through that and looked at the capabilities that we had in the United States Air Forces in Europe, for example, we had a base opening capability called the CRG, Combat Readiness Group, that would go out and open up bases. We had airlift, we had tankers, we had a great relationship with Air Mobility Command, U.S. Transportation Command. So we sold ourselves as a potential headquarters that could be of great use to SACEUR and any type of humanitarian operation in any one of those 93 countries. And he bought off onto it. And so Joint Forces Command came out and we did a big, long, almost month-long exercise based around that. Again, preparing not only our forces, but our Navy and Army brother for how to react, for example, in the case of a major humanitarian operation. Just before I retired, I got to be a JTF commander for about a 2-week operation. All told, it was probably about a month, because we got 2 weeks notice, a heads up from the Secret Service, that President Bush was going to make a kind of a swan song tour of Africa, if you will, and visit 6 countries. And here we are 2 weeks out, and the Secret Service announced that they would like to have air cover everywhere the president went. And having spent most of my life in air mobility, I mentioned to him, we don't have enough free airlift or enough airlift in the whole free world to be able to bring fighters and barriers and sweepers and fuel trucks and bladders to 6 different locations. So, together with them, we planned and we looked at some of the locations were near the coast. And so I said, well, how about if we have some Navy Aegis cruisers there? So I flew down to Portugal and met with the 6th Fleet commander, and he gladly lent us a couple of his Aegis cruisers for that operation, which was really a lifesaver, because people don't understand when the President of the United States goes somewhere out of the country to an austere location. While I was over there, President Bush came to Europe a lot, but it was to the UK or to France, or it was to Germany, where those nations would provide the protection. One time he came over and went to Albania. And that's a major operation for us because now Albania didn't have an air force that could provide that cover. So, we had to stand up a little group to do that. But when you're going to, which is thousands of miles away from where we were in Europe,
Yeah.
to all these countries in Africa, all the steer locations, we had to deploy some radars to one of those nations, and we deployed over 2,000 Americans in a very, very short period of time to those locations to run the different bases, et cetera. All told, when all is said and done, and working with Air Mobility Command told me they flew 790 missions. And people don't realize how big of a operation that is when you count the tanker support, the airlift over, all the hard cars, et cetera, that you have to move around. So that was a great way to really wrap up my career, because I retired about 2 weeks after running that operation. But again, it reinforced for me, again, just how I did before I retired. I went to Washington and met with the Secret Service there and said, I got a personal letter from President Bush, but I said, you were successful in this mission because we have great Americans, and we carried that mission on the backs of great Americans that made great sacrifice. I know the challenges of trying to keep things secure until the last minute, but an operation like that, it would be nice to have more than 2 weeks to go in and plan it. So that kind of gives you a rough sketch, Al, as to some of the highlights. I mean, I could go into more. I flew Hillary and Chelsea on that famous mission where the former First Lady told the world that we were fired upon, and I was kind of scratching my head when I saw that one because I didn't remember that
Where'd
one.
it come from?
I thought since I was on board, I probably would have. And I had the opportunity of being Air Force One and fly president in and out of Bosnia a number of times. So those are some highlights as well. But that's a good rough sketch, I think.
So did you get a T-shirt for flight crew on Air Force One?
No, we did get a lot of playing cards and matches.
Okay. Well, General, that's an amazing career, and thank you so much for your dedication to your country and for being there when it was needed. And thank you also for continuing that now in STARS. We need that more than ever. And
Well,
again,
thanks, Al. I'm just wrapping it up the way I would like to wrap it up if I could, because
sure.
I mean, given 7 Air Force commands, 2 joint commands, I personally feel the most important mission that I have had in my life is the one that I'm involved with now. And that's trying to save our military and trying to get America to wake up to what is happening. I saw Cindy just showed a picture of Coast Guard Academy now ensign with our general counsel and myself pinning on her shoulder boards at the graduation. And that was another ancillary thing. I don't know if you have plans to talk about STARS roles in the vaccine mandate, but that's one of the things that I think, if somebody would ask me if I were on my deathbed right now, someone asked me, what do you think the greatest accomplishment you had in your life was? I would say unquestionably, and this has cost me lots of friends, and this has cost me people saying you're off the reservation when we took that mission on. But once we peeled back the onion on what the government was doing, what the government was hiding, and now we have the substantiation of 8 different courts agreeing with the position that we took on that vaccine mandate. It's tyranny. It was tyranny at its best. And I think it was wrapped up very well by an Air Force lawyer friend of mine who told me that was nothing but a Hitlerian loyalty oath. people did not look at the data. They did not see that young people, were not affected by the disease as the elderly and the obese were. So I would say, without question, I think I'm most proud of helping play a role. I mean, it certainly played a role. STARS didn't do it all by itself,
Yep.
but playing a role in saving tens of thousands of careers and getting America and Congress to wake up to end that mandate. Unfortunately, the way in which Congress did it, I understand that that's as good as they could do. But I've described it like kissing. It's better than kissing your sister, kind of like kissing your cousin, maybe. That it just didn't go far enough. Didn't go far enough in making it easier for people to get their careers back, cleaning up the records, changing all the discharges from under honorable conditions to or from general discharge to honorable discharges. Just didn't go far enough there. Didn't automatically connect some of the harmful effects, medical effects that we know of have come from the vaccine to automatic health care, et cetera. So we still have some work to do on that one.
We do indeed, and I think the best thing that we can do is take care of the troops in a way that they deserve. And thanks, General, again for doing it.
We're trying now.
We'll end here for now, but again, we need the help of people, do we not? And they can sign on with us and help this come to some conclusion. We got lots of work to do. And so for this episode, it's Alan Palmer, your host here for Stars and Stripes. We'll see you the next time. Thanks very much for watching.